The sun had barely set over the secluded stretch of coastline, casting an amber glow across the dunes as the college students arrived, their laughter and music cutting through the rhythmic crash of waves. It was spring break, and this beach hidden away from the crowded resorts was the perfect spot for an epic, no-rules party. Steve, the self-appointed ringleader, had planned it all. A bonfire, endless drinks, and a strict Vegas rules policy. "No phones," he declared, holding up a canvas bag as the group piled out of their cars. "We don't need this night ending up on the internet." The crowd, Jonah, Shonda, Kay, Ronnie, Gilbert, Vance, Mara, and a dozen others cheered, tossing their devices into the bag with reckless abandon. Midterms were over, and freedom tasted like cheap beer and salty air. The beach was alive with energy. A boombox blasted hip-hop and pop anthems, the bonfire roared, and the group danced in the flickering light. Steve, with his infectious grin, rallied everyone into games of beer pong and impromptu dance-offs. Jonah, the quiet one with a surfer's tan, stuck close to Shonda, his girlfriend, though his eyes occasionally wandered to Kay, who was flirting shamelessly with anyone who'd pay attention. Ronnie, the group's pragmatic voice, kept an eye on the chaos, while Gilbert, already tipsy, stumbled around, earning laughs with his clumsy antics. Vance and Mara, the couple who couldn't keep their hands off each other, slipped away from the fire to steal a moment alone. The night felt invincible, a perfect snapshot of youth and rebellion. As the hours passed, the party grew wilder. Mara, egged on by Steve's chants, climbed onto a driftwood log and shed her top, twirling it above her head to the crowd's cheers. "This is for my mom," she shouted, half-joking, before blushing and scrambling to cover herself when someone mentioned her mother seeing the photos. The bonfire began to dwindle, and the group scattered to gather more wood. "We need firewood," Steve yelled, tossing empty cans into the sand. No one noticed the faint tremor beneath their feet, the way the sand seemed to shift unnaturally, as if alive. The first scream shattered the night's euphoria. It came from Vance, who had wandered with Mara to a quiet spot near the dunes. His voice was raw, panicked, unlike anything the group had ever heard. "Help! It's got me!" he shouted. Jonah, Shonda, and Steve sprinted toward the sound, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They found Vance thrashing in the sand, his legs sinking as if pulled by an invisible force. Mara stood frozen, screaming, as Vance clawed at the ground, his fingers leaving bloody streaks. "It's pulling me down!" he gasped. Before anyone could reach him, the sand surged, swallowing him whole. The group stared at the spot where he'd been, the sand smooth and undisturbed, as if he'd never existed. Chaos erupted. Mara, hysterical, bolted toward the group, but tripped, her feet sinking into the sand. "I'm stuck!" she cried, her voice rising in terror. Jonah and Steve grabbed her arms, pulling with all their strength, but the sand held fast, its grip tightening. "It's alive!" Mara screamed as her legs disappeared. The group watched, helpless, as she sank. Her final scream cut off as the sand closed over her head. Silence followed, broken only by the distant waves and the group's ragged breathing. The survivors retreated to higher ground driftwood logs, a lifeguard stand, and the hood of Jonah's beat-up SUV. Gilbert, who'd drunkenly fallen into a trash can during the chaos, was stuck, his legs wedged tight. "Get me out of here!" he yelled, his voice slurred but desperate. The group realized the sand was no ordinary beach. It was a predator, a living entity that consumed anything that touched it. "It wasn't like this last night," Shonda whispered, her hands trembling. "They'd walked on the sand during the party, danced on it, spilled drinks on it. Something had changed." Jonah, climbing onto a piece of driftwood, spotted something half buried in the dunes, a leathery, egg-like structure, cracked open as if it had hatched. "This wasn't here before," he said, his voice low. Shonda joined him, her flashlight illuminating the object's grotesque surface, slick with a strange, viscous fluid. "It's like an egg," she said. Something came out of it. The group exchanged uneasy glances, their minds racing with possibilities. A creature? A chemical spill? Government experiment gone wrong? "Whatever it is, it's under the sand," Ronnie said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "And it's hungry." The night stretched on, the group stranded on their makeshift islands. The car battery was dead, the phones locked in the trunk, and the beach was deserted. Spring break meant no one would come looking for them. Gilbert's situation grew dire as the tide crept closer, threatening to flood his trash can. "It hurts, man," he groaned, his face pale. Jonah, determined to act, devised a plan to cross the sand using a surfboard as a shield. "If I can get to the car, we can get the phones," he said. Shonda grabbed his arm. "Don't. It'll kill you." But Jonah's jaw was set. "We're not just gonna sit here and die." He stepped onto the surfboard, inching forward, the sand quivering beneath him. For a moment, it seemed to work. Then the sand surged, tendrils like fine, hair like filaments slashing at his legs. Jonah screamed, collapsing as the board sank. The pain was excruciating, like 1,000 jellyfish stings burning through his skin. Shonda and Kay dragged him back to the lifeguard stand, his legs red and blistered. "It's poison," Ronnie said, examining the wounds. "That's why it hurt so bad." Tensions flared as the group grappled with their predicament. Kay, furious after overhearing Shonda confess to a fleeting moment with Jonah during the party, lashed out. "You screwed my boyfriend," she shouted, shoving Shonda. Jonah, weak from pain, tried to intervene. It didn't mean anything, he rasped. But the betrayal stung, fracturing the group's fragile unity. Ronnie, ever the peacemaker, stepped in. We don't have time for this. We need to get out. A new hope emerged when a beach patrol officer rolled up in a jeep, his radio crackling. The group shouted warnings, but the officer, a grizzled man in his 50s, dismissed them as drugged-up kids. You think I haven't seen spring break nonsense before? He scoffed, stepping onto the sand. The group's screams came too late. The sand erupted, tendrils wrapping around his legs, pulling him down. His pepper spray and radio sank with him, but not before the group noticed his boots had briefly slowed the sand's attack. His shoes, Shonda said. They protected him. Inspired, Kay hatched a plan. She wrapped her feet in beach towels, doused them with the officer's pepper spray, and prepared to run for the car. I'm fast, she said, her voice resolute. I can make it. Jonah, barely conscious, begged her to stay, but Kay was determined. She sprinted across the sand, her towel-wrapped feet pounding the ground. For a moment, it seemed she'd succeed. Then the sand surged, faster than before, and Kay vanished, her scream echoing in the dawn. The loss crushed the group, but Shonda refused to give up. She found an inflatable raft in the car, a relic from some forgotten beach trip. We can use this, she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. With Ronnie's help, she built a bridge of sorts, laying the raft across the sand to reach Jonah and Gilbert. The sand grew more aggressive, the lifeguard stand creaking as the creature beneath expanded its reach. Gilbert, his strength fading, muttered, I don't want to die with a dick on my face, referring to a crude drawing his friends had scrawled on him during the party. Shonda forced a smile. You're not dying. The rescue was a race against time. Shonda and Ronnie dragged Jonah, his body racked with pain, across the raft. Gilbert, freed from the trash can, leaned on Ronnie, his legs barely functional. The sand lashed at the raft, tendrils tearing through the rubber, but they reached the car just as the lifeguard stand collapsed. Shonda climbed into the driver's seat, her hands shaking as she hot-wired the ignition Jonah had taught her how years ago. The engine sputtered to life, and they floored it, the sand erupting behind them like a living wave. As they sped away, the beach grew quiet, the sand settling as if sated. The survivors Shonda, Jonah, Ronnie, and Gilbert sat in stunned silence, the weight of their losses settling in. Vance, Mara, Kay, the officer, and countless others were gone, devoured by a force they couldn't comprehend. Shonda clutched a letter Ronnie had written to her mother, a promise to deliver it if they survived. Jonah, his body scarred and weak, whispered apologies to Shonda, who squeezed his hand. We made it, she said, though the words felt hollow. They drove until they reached a gas station, the first sign of civilization. The clerk, seeing their bloodied clothes and haunted eyes, called the police. The authorities listened to their story, but dismissed it as a drug-fueled hallucination. Sand doesn't eat people, a detective said, shaking his head. The group knew better. They'd seen the egg, felt the tendrils, watched their friends vanish. The beach was a predator, and they'd barely escaped its jaws. Days later, Shonda delivered Ronnie's letter, her hands trembling as she handed it to Ronnie's mother. The woman read it silently, tears streaming down her face, then hugged Shonda tightly. Jonah, recovering in a hospital, promised Shonda they'd move forward together, their love tested but unbroken. Gilbert, his humor returning, joked about getting the drawing washed off his face, though his eyes carried a new weight. Ronnie, ever practical, started researching, scouring the internet for reports of similar incidents. She found whisper-sold stories of beaches where people vanished, dismissed as accidents or folklore. The truth was out there, buried like the creature they'd escaped. The beach remained closed, cordoned off with vague signs about environmental hazards. No one went near it, and no one spoke of the egg or the tendrils. But Shonda, Jonah, Ronnie, and Gilbert knew the sand was still there, waiting. It was patient, ancient, and hungry, its appetite only temporarily sated. They carried the scars physical and emotional of that night, a reminder that some places are not meant for humans. The sand that devours had let them go, but it would never forget them.